If you are a man over 50 and your energy has been quietly declining, if your mornings feel heavier than they used to, if you notice yourself pulling back from intimacy, not because the desire has disappeared, but because your body simply is not responding the way it once did, I want you to pay close attention to what I am about to share. Because what I am going to describe today is not about willpower, aging gracefully, or accepting the inevitable. It is about 3 specific nutritional deficiencies that are among the most common and most consistently overlooked contributors to exactly the symptoms you are experiencing, and that are, in most cases, considerably more correctable than most men assume. The pattern I am describing is one I encounter in my clinical work with regularity. A man in his mid to late 50s or 60s who is living reasonably healthily, eating reasonably well, getting reasonable sleep, and still waking up tired, still feeling like something has drained out of his days, still noticing that the physical vitality and sexual responsiveness that were once simply there, without effort or thought, have become unreliable or absent. He has often been told in so many words that this is just aging, that it is what happens, that his best option is to adjust his expectations. That is not always accurate. And when it is not accurate, the reason is frequently found not in some unfixable feature of the aging process, but in the quiet, gradual depletion of specific nutrients that the male body depends on for blood flow, neurological function, and hormonal balance. And that decline in availability with age through mechanisms that are documented, understood, and addressable. I am Dr. Julia Rhodes, a men's sex therapist with over a decade of experience working with different couples and helping men regain their sexual health and strength back. And today I am going to walk you through the 3 nutrients that I consider most important in this context, explain exactly what they do for the male body after 50, explain what happens when they become depleted, and give you clear and practical guidance on how to restore them. I am also going to cover the single most common mistake men make when they try to address nutritional deficiencies through supplementation, because making this mistake will reliably prevent you from seeing results, even if you do everything else correctly. Before we get into the content, please subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications if you have not already. Every week, I publish clinically grounded, practical content on men's sexual and overall health that is designed to be genuinely useful in your real life. The physiological context. Why nutritional deficiencies affect men over 50 differently. Before we get into the specific nutrients, I want to give you a brief clinical framework that will make everything else in today's video more meaningful and more actionable. The sexual and energetic vitality of the male body after 50 depends on 3 interconnected physiological systems working in coordination. The first is the vascular system, specifically the health and function of the blood vessels that deliver oxygen and nutrients to every organ and tissue, including the erectile tissue of the penis. The second is the neurological and metabolic system, specifically the efficiency with which the body converts food into cellular energy and maintains the nerve function required for arousal, sensation, and hormonal signaling. The third is the endocrine system, specifically the hormonal environment that regulates testosterone, cortisol, and the other hormones most directly relevant to libido, energy, mood, and sexual function. All three of these systems are nutritionally dependent. They require specific micronutrients to function efficiently, and when those micronutrients are depleted, function in all three systems declines in ways that produce the exact cluster of symptoms most men over 50 recognize. Fatigue that persists despite adequate sleep, reduced sexual drive and response, difficulty maintaining erections, a sense of flatness or reduced engagement with life, and the frustrating feeling that the body is no longer reliably available. With that framework in place, let us look at the three nutrients. Nutrient 1. Vitamin D and its central role in vascular and sexual function. Vitamin D is, in clinical reality, far more than a bone health nutrient. It functions as a steroid hormone precursor with effects throughout the body, and its relevance to male sexual health and cardiovascular function is both substantial and well documented. In the context of vascular health, vitamin D plays a direct regulatory role in endothelial function. The endothelium is the single-cell thick lining of your blood vessels, and it is one of the most physiologically important tissues in the body. The endothelium is responsible for producing nitric oxide, the signaling molecule that causes blood vessel walls to relax and dilate, allowing blood to flow freely and in adequate volume to every organ and tissue. Without adequate nitric oxide production, blood vessels remain in a state of increased tone, tighter, stiffer, and less responsive to the demands of the body's various systems. For men over 50, this matters directly and significantly because adequate nitric oxide production is one of the fundamental requirements of erectile function. An erection is initiated when the nervous system triggers nitric oxide release in the penile vasculature, causing the arterial smooth muscle to relax, the arteries to dilate, and blood to flood the corpus cavernosum. When nitric oxide production is impaired by endothelial dysfunction, this process is compromised. The result is reduced erectile quality and reliability, and often an increased requirement for direct physical stimulation to achieve arousal that was previously straightforwardly spontaneous. Vitamin D supports endothelial function through several mechanisms. It directly enhances endothelial nitric oxide synthase, the enzyme responsible for producing nitric oxide in the vascular endothelium. It reduces the expression of pro-inflammatory cytokines that damage the endothelium over time. And it modulates the renin-angiotensin system, which is one of the primary regulators of blood pressure and vascular tone. These are not speculative mechanisms. They are documented at the cellular and molecular level. The prevalence of vitamin D insufficiency and deficiency in men over 50 is substantial. Multiple large population studies have found that the majority of adults in northern latitudes are vitamin D insufficient, particularly during autumn and winter months. The mechanism is straightforward. Vitamin D synthesis in the skin requires ultraviolet B radiation from sunlight, and the efficiency of this synthesis declines significantly with age. A 50-year-old man's skin synthesizes vitamin D from sun exposure at approximately half the efficiency of a 20-year-old's skin. Combined with the reduced time most adults spend outdoors as they age, this creates a systematic and very common nutritional gap that affects the vascular and hormonal systems, with direct consequences for sexual health. From a dietary standpoint, the food sources of vitamin D are limited. Fatty fish, such as salmon, mackerel, and sardines, are the most significant dietary sources. Eggs provide modest amounts. Fortified foods such as certain dairy products and cereals add to intake, but rarely to levels sufficient to compensate for inadequate sun exposure in older men. The supplementation recommendation is clear. If you are a man over 50 in a northern latitude, or if you spend most of your time indoors, a daily vitamin D3 supplement is the most reliable means of maintaining adequate levels. The D3 form, cholecalciferol, is the same form the skin produces and is considerably more effective at raising and maintaining serum levels than D2, ergocalciferol, which is sometimes found in lower quality products. The generally recommended supplementation range for adults is between 1,000 and 2,000 international units daily with a meal, though individual requirements vary, and testing your serum 25-hydroxyvitamin D level annually is the most reliable way to determine your specific needs and adjust accordingly. A supplement program addressing vitamin D alone will not resolve every contributor to reduced energy and sexual function. But restoring vitamin D to adequate levels systematically addresses one of the most common and most impactful nutritional gaps in men over 50. And it creates the vascular foundation on which everything else depends. Nutrient 2. Vitamin B12 and the fuel system for energy and nerve function. If vitamin D provides the vascular infrastructure for energy and sexual function, vitamin B12 provides the metabolic fuel and the neurological wiring that allows that infrastructure to be used effectively. Vitamin B12 is essential for two processes that are directly relevant to the symptoms most common in men over 50. The first is the conversion of food into adenosine triphosphate, which is the primary energy currency of the cell. The metabolic pathways through which carbohydrates, fats, and proteins are converted into usable cellular energy depend on B12-dependent enzyme reactions. When B12 is insufficient, these pathways are impaired, and the result is the cellular equivalent of running on a depleted battery. Adequate food intake, but reduced capacity to convert that intake into the energy the body needs. This is why B12 deficiency presents primarily as fatigue, and specifically as a type of fatigue that is not relieved by sleep. The man who sleeps 8 hours and wakes up still tired, who drags through afternoons regardless of what he has eaten, who finds that his body does not seem to respond to the inputs he gives it with the energy it should produce, is describing the clinical presentation of B12 insufficiency with considerable precision. The second process is myelin synthesis. The myelin sheath is the protective coating around nerve fibers that is essential for rapid, efficient neural transmission. Vitamin B12 is required for the maintenance of myelin, and when B12 is insufficient, myelin begins to break down, producing a range of neurological symptoms, including cognitive fog, reduced concentration, impaired memory, and reduced sensory acuity. For men over 50, this neurological dimension of B12 deficiency is particularly significant because it affects the neural signaling that underlies sexual arousal, sensation, and response, functions that depend on rapid, clear nerve communication throughout the pelvic nervous system. The absorption mechanism for vitamin B12 from food is the critical issue for men in this age group. Dietary B12 is bound to food proteins and must be cleaved by stomach acid before it can be absorbed. In younger people with adequate gastric acid production, this process is efficient. However, gastric acid production declines with age, a condition called hypochlorhydria or achlorhydria in more severe cases, and it is substantially more common in people over 50 than is generally recognized. Additionally, many of the proton pump inhibitors and H2 receptor antagonists widely prescribed for acid reflux and heartburn in this age group directly suppress gastric acid, further impairing dietary B12 absorption. The result is a man who may be eating B12-containing foods, including meat, eggs, and dairy, but who is absorbing a fraction of the B12 those foods contain. His dietary intake appears adequate, but his functional B12 status is not. The supplementation solution for age-related B12 malabsorption is straightforward. High-dose oral B12 in the form of methylcobalamin or adenosylcobalamin. These are the active coenzyme forms of B12 that the body can use directly without the conversion steps required by cyanocobalamin, the cheaper and more commonly used form found in low-quality supplements. Crucially, at sufficiently high doses, approximately 500 to 1,000 micrograms daily, a proportion of oral B12 is absorbed by passive diffusion rather than by the intrinsic factor-dependent active transport mechanism that is impaired by reduced gastric acid. This passive absorption pathway bypasses the absorption problem, making high-dose oral supplementation with the active forms of B12 an effective strategy even in men with significantly impaired gastric acid production. For men whose B12 deficiency is more severe or long-standing, intramuscular B12 injections provide the most direct route to restoration by bypassing the gastrointestinal system entirely. This is a conversation to have with your doctor if serum B12 testing confirms significantly low levels. The functional improvement from correcting B12 deficiency is frequently dramatic and relatively rapid. Reduced fatigue, improved mental clarity, improved mood and engagement, and in many cases, a meaningful improvement in sexual energy and responsiveness that has a direct neurological basis. Nutrient 3, vitamin E and the protection of vascular and hormonal health. While vitamins D and B12 work to build and fuel the systems required for male vitality, vitamin E functions as the protective layer that prevents those systems from being progressively undermined by oxidative stress, the biochemical process that is one of the primary mechanisms of age-related vascular and hormonal deterioration. Oxidative stress occurs when the production of reactive oxygen species, which are unstable molecular byproducts of normal cellular metabolism, exceeds the body's capacity to neutralize them. These reactive molecules cause damage to cell membranes, proteins, and DNA, and their accumulation over time is one of the most important drivers of the changes in vascular function and hormonal production that characterize healthy aging and its pathological accelerations. For male sexual and vascular health specifically, oxidative stress is relevant in two primary ways. First, it damages the endothelium, reducing its capacity to produce nitric oxide and increasing its susceptibility to the inflammatory changes that lead to atherosclerosis. The progressive stiffening of arteries that reduces erectile reliability and increases cardiovascular risk over time is substantially driven by oxidative damage to endothelial cells and vascular smooth muscle. Second, it damages the Leydig cells in the testes that are responsible for testosterone synthesis. Testosterone production after 50 is already reduced by the natural decline in Leydig cell number and activity. Oxidative stress accelerates this decline, contributing to the lower testosterone levels that affect energy, libido, and sexual function in older men. Vitamin E is one of the body's primary fat-soluble antioxidants, and its protective role in the vascular and hormonal systems is established in the research literature. As an antioxidant, it neutralizes reactive oxygen species in the lipid environments of cell membranes and in the low-density lipoprotein particles that are susceptible to oxidative modification. It reduces the inflammatory signaling that accompanies oxidative damage, and it supports the structural integrity of the cell membranes in vascular and endocrine tissues in ways that maintain their functional efficiency over time. The food sources of vitamin E are genuinely accessible and worth building into daily habits, regardless of whether supplementation is also used. A daily serving of nuts, particularly almonds or sunflower seeds, provides a meaningful contribution to vitamin E intake. Olive oil, avocado, and leafy green vegetables, particularly spinach and Swiss chard, are all useful dietary sources. The Mediterranean dietary pattern, which emphasizes many of these foods, has among the strongest evidence bases for both cardiovascular protection and sexual health maintenance in older men, partly through its antioxidant content. Supplementation with vitamin E, when dietary intake is insufficient, should use a natural source vitamin E product that specifies mixed tocopherols on the label. The complete vitamin E family consists of 4 tocopherols and 4 tocotrienols, and the body's protective mechanisms depend on the balanced presence of this full spectrum rather than on alpha tocopherol alone, which is the only form found in many synthetic vitamin E supplements. Natural source mixed tocopherol supplements provide the breadth of antioxidant coverage that the body expects and uses most effectively. The synergy of all three, why they work better together. One of the most clinically interesting aspects of these three nutrients is that their effects are not simply additive. They are synergistic in ways that are worth understanding, because understanding the synergy explains why addressing all three simultaneously produces results that addressing any single one does not. Vitamin D establishes the vascular environment, functional endothelium, adequate nitric oxide production, responsive blood vessels. This is the infrastructure. Vitamin B12 fuels the metabolic and neurological systems that use that infrastructure. Efficient energy production, clear neural signaling, the cellular machinery that translates physical capacity into lived vitality. This is the fuel and the wiring. Vitamin E protects both systems from the oxidative deterioration that would progressively undermine the gains from the other two. This is the maintenance system. Without adequate D, the blood vessels cannot deliver blood efficiently, regardless of how well fueled the cells are or how well protected the endothelium is. Without adequate B12, the neural and metabolic systems cannot function efficiently, regardless of how open the blood vessels are. Without adequate E, the improvements produced by D and B12 are progressively eroded by the oxidative damage that neither of the other two nutrients directly addresses. Together, they address the three most important nutritional foundations of male vitality after 50: vascular function, metabolic and neural energy, and protection from oxidative deterioration. And together, they create a physiological environment in which the systems that support energy, drive, and sexual function can operate with considerably more efficiency than they can in a state of any one of these deficiencies. The critical mistake: why supplement quality determines whether this works. The most significant practical obstacle to benefiting from the nutritional approach I have described is not access to the supplements themselves. It is the quality of the supplements chosen, because the differences between high-quality and low-quality formulations in terms of actual bioavailability and clinical effect are very large. And most men have no way of knowing this when they are standing in front of a supplement display. For vitamin B12, the form of the supplement is the determining variable. Cyanocobalamin, the form used in most inexpensive B12 supplements, must be converted in the liver to the active coenzyme forms before the body can use it. In healthy young adults with efficient liver function, this conversion happens adequately. In men over 50, and particularly in men with impaired gastric acid production, this conversion step adds a meaningful inefficiency to an absorption process that is already compromised. Methylcobalamin and adenosylcobalamin, the active forms, do not require this conversion and are ready for cellular use immediately on absorption. The price difference between a cyanocobalamin supplement and a methylcobalamin supplement is modest. The functional difference in men over 50 can be substantial. For vitamin D, the form distinction is between D2 and D3. Vitamin D2, ergocalciferol, is derived from plant sources and is less effective at raising and sustaining serum 25-hydroxyvitamin D levels than D3, cholecalciferol, which is the form synthesized by the skin and which is far more efficiently processed by the body. This is well established in the research literature. Any vitamin D supplement for a man over 50 should specify D3 on the label. For vitamin E, the distinction between natural source and synthetic alpha-tocopherol is both relevant and frequently overlooked. Synthetic alpha-tocopherol has lower bioavailability than natural source vitamin E, and more importantly, it provides only one of the 8 compounds in the complete vitamin E family. As I noted above, the body's antioxidant protective mechanisms in fatty tissue environments depend on the full spectrum of tocopherols working together. A mixed tocopherol product derived from natural sources provides the breadth of protection the body needs and uses. The second critical factor is consistency. Supplementation with any of these nutrients requires daily, uninterrupted maintenance to be effective. The body does not store these nutrients in quantities that can compensate for irregular dosing. Vitamin D can be stored in fat tissue for moderate periods, but B12 and E benefit from consistent daily supply. The men who take a supplement for 2 days and then forget for 4 days, or who take it intensively for a week and then stop, do not build the physiological changes these nutrients produce. Those changes require sustained, consistent daily intake over weeks to months before their full effects are realized. If today's video gave you a clearer understanding of 3 specific and correctable nutritional contributors to the symptoms you may be experiencing, please do 3 things right now. Hit the like button because it helps more men find this content at exactly the moment they need it. Leave a comment below and tell me which of these 3 nutrients you are going to address first. And please subscribe with notifications on if you have not already. I am Dr. Julia Rhodes. I will see you in the next video.